If you grew up in a North American city between the late 1950s and the 1980s, you've seen this bus. Maybe you rode it to school. Maybe it took you to your first job. And even if you never stepped inside one, you know that face. The GM New Look, better known as the Fishbowl. From 1959 to 1986, it ruled the streets. It wasn't just transportation, it was part of the soundtrack of daily life. The rumble of its Detroit diesel engine, the hiss of its doors, the giant curved windshields tearing down traffic. On TV, it was the default city bus. In postcards, it was as familiar as the skyline. It was everywhere. Los Angeles, Chicago, Toronto, New York. It became so iconic that even people who never rode one still remember how it looked. In 1960, a brand new 40-foot Fishbowl cost a transit agency around $25,000, about $250,000 today. A massive investment, but GM promised it would run for decades. And for a while, it did. Millions rode it every single day. But here's the twist. The title of this video says it all. The ugly truth about America's favorite bus. Because behind that friendly, futuristic face was a machine that could be costly, temperamental, and frustrating to keep on the road. A bus transit agencies loved to show off and sometimes hated to maintain. The Fishbowl's most famous feature, its 5-panel curved glass windshield, was both its blessing and its curse. From the inside, passengers loved it. It gave a bright, panoramic view of the streets ahead, almost like sitting in the front row of a moving theater. From the outside, it made the bus instantly recognizable. Even from a block away, you could spot that massive bubble of glass. But for drivers, that glass could be brutal. In summer, the cab area overheated fast. Air conditioning was rare in the 1960s and early 1970s, so in cities like New York, Philadelphia, and Los Angeles, drivers often sat for hours in what felt like a greenhouse on wheels. Interviews with retired transit operators recall guys bringing towels just to wipe sweat off their faces between stops. Glare was another problem. In Boston, a 1971 MTA safety report noted that the curved glass could catch the sun in late afternoon and reflect it directly into the driver's eyes. In San Diego, drivers learned to lean into the shadows created by the roof's pillars just to see the road ahead. For a vehicle making constant stops in heavy traffic, even a split second of lost vision could be dangerous. The sleek aluminum body panels were another double-edged sword. They looked sharp, they saved weight, and they made the Fishbowl easier on fuel than the steel-bodied buses it replaced. But in winter cities, Chicago, Toronto, Boston, Minneapolis, they had a hidden weakness: salt. Road crews spread it heavily in snowy months, and the Fishbowl's panel seams and underfloor cavities acted like salt traps. Over time, the corrosion worked its way deep into the structure. It didn't just eat away at wheel wells, it attacked the stairwells, the side sills, and in severe cases, the main frame rails. Once that happened, the cost of repair could rival the cost of a replacement bus. Toronto Transit Commission records show some Fishbowls retired after just 10 to 12 years, despite being bought for a 20-year lifespan. Then there was the powertrain. Most Fishbowls use the Detroit diesel 6V71, a 6-cylinder 2-stroke diesel making about 238 horsepower. In flat cities like Los Angeles, Miami, or Houston, it was fine. But in Pittsburgh, Seattle, or San Francisco, it was a different story. Fully loaded with passengers, a Fishbowl could crawl up steep hills at walking speed. Engine straining, temp gauge climbing. Fuel economy was another sore point. On paper, the 6V71 was efficient for its size, but real-world city driving, constant starts, long idles, steep climbs, could drain the tank faster than expected. Mechanics in Denver called that the sound of a Fishbowl downshifting on a hill became so common it was nicknamed the Whale. By the late 1970s, some agencies had had enough. They spent serious money to upgrade to the more powerful Detroit diesel 6V92 engine, which offered better torque and durability. But the cost wasn't small. A midlife overhaul could run $40,000 per bus in the late 1970s dollars, roughly $170,000 today. For big systems like New York or Toronto, Those upgrades made sense because they already had huge Fishbowl fleets. For smaller cities like Omaha or Akron, it was cheaper to buy newer buses than to keep patching up the old ones. The result was a patchwork legacy. In some cities, the Fishbowl became a decades-long workhorse. In others, it was a high-maintenance headache retired before it could reach middle age. When the GM new look debuted in 1959, it was unlike anything on the streets. At a time when most buses looked like rolling shoeboxes, the Fishbowl felt like it came from the future. The huge curved windshield wasn't just a styling gimmick, it gave drivers better visibility at intersections and let passengers see the city in a whole new way. The design came out of GM's truck and coach division in Pontiac, Michigan, and it was a bold gamble. The post-war boom years had made cities busier than ever, and agencies were desperate for something modern to replace their aging fleets. GM promised the new look would be lighter, more fuel-efficient, and easier to service than anything that came before. Transit agencies lined up. In the first full year of production, orders came in from coast to coast. By the mid-1960s, the Fishbowl was everywhere. New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Toronto, Vancouver, Miami, and hundreds of smaller systems in between. Over its 27-year production run, GM built more than 44,000 new looks in various lengths and configurations, making it one of the most successful transit bus designs in history. Toronto alone eventually operated over 2,600 of them, while New York's MTA ran them in every borough. They weren't just popular with agencies, riders formed a real connection to them. For commuters, the Fishbowl was part of the daily routine. You'd recognize your bus line from half a block away, watching that giant windshield approach. The interior was simple but functional, wide aisles, big windows, and a layout that made boarding quick in busy downtown stops. They also left a mark on pop culture. In Kojak and Hill Street Blues, Fishbowls appeared in street scenes so often they became background characters. Old postcards from New York, Chicago, and Toronto show them rolling past landmarks like the CN Tower, Times Square, and Disneyland gates. And in the early scenes of the movie Speed, a real fishbowl is briefly spotted in Los Angeles traffic, a blink and you'll miss it moment for transit fans. Documentary footage from the 1960s often shows them gliding past sidewalks packed with people in hats and suits, neon signs glowing in the background. In black and white newsreels, they looked clean and futuristic. In color film from the 70s, their bright paint schemes popped against a gritty urban backdrop. And for kids, they were magic. Sitting near the front, you could look through that huge glass bubble and feel like you were driving the city yourself. On rainy nights, the wipers would sweep in wide arcs, and the lights of the street would turn the windshield into a living kaleidoscope. The Fishbowl wasn't just a bus, it became a moving piece of urban identity. Whether you loved it or barely noticed it, it was always there. The quiet workhorse carrying a city's life from one stop to the next. By the late 1970s, the shine was wearing off the Fishbowl. Transit systems were demanding more from their fleets. Air conditioning for summer comfort, wheelchair lifts for accessibility, better emissions control to meet new environmental laws, and stronger frames that could survive decades of hard use. The Fishbowl could be upgraded, but it wasn't designed for this new era. In New York, retrofitting lifts into the high-floor design was a nightmare. In Los Angeles, corrosion from ocean air had already eaten through panels and steps. Chicago's CTA found that, even after expensive overhauls, road salt kept winning the war against the aluminum body seams. Some agencies fought hard to keep them alive. Toronto's TTC, which had one of the largest fishbowl fleets in the world, launched massive midlife rebuild programs in the 1980s. Mechanics stripped buses to the frame, replaced panels, upgraded to the Detroit diesel 6V92TA engine, and modernized interiors. The result? Some fishbowls in Toronto ran for 27 years, nearly triple the lifespan of many modern low-floor buses today. Other cities made more emotional farewells. In New York, the MTA retired the last fishbowls in 1995. Transit fans and city photographers lined the streets to watch them roll in one final time. There's video footage of drivers honking as they pulled into the depot, some of them decorated with farewell banners. In San Francisco, Muni let a few go quietly and with no send-off. They were simply replaced by newer coaches overnight. Not all fishbowls went to the scrapyard. Some found second lives in smaller towns, sold at a fraction of their original cost to rural transit systems or even private tour operators. Others were bought by collectors who saw them as rolling pieces of art. One of the most famous preserved examples is an ex-Los Angeles fishbowl, repainted in its original livery and now on display at the Peterson Automotive Museum. Another, a 1965 model from the Niagara Falls Transit Commission, still carries tourists along scenic routes, just as it did decades ago. A few even became stars again. Vintage fishbowls are now regular guests at classic vehicle shows, drawing crowds of former riders eager to sit in the front seat one more time. Others have been converted into retro-themed RVs, complete with original dashboard controls and that unmistakable bubble windshield. The truth is, the fishbowl had a split reputation. For some, it was a costly, temperamental machine that bled maintenance budgets dry. For others, it was the dependable workhorse that kept cities moving year after year. And that's the twist. It could be both, depending on where you lived and how your transit system treated it. Some agencies were glad to see the last one leave. Others still speak of them with pride. But whether you were a rider, a driver, or a mechanic, the fishbowl left an impression. You don't forget a bus with a face like that. For millions, the fishbowl wasn't just a ride. It was part of the rhythm of daily life. It was the bus that took you to your first job, the one you rode home from school with friends, the one you saw waiting on a rainy morning, headlights glowing through the mist. It was flawed. It was costly. It made mechanics curse and transit managers pull their hair out. But it was also loved, deeply, stubbornly, and for decades. And that's why, even now, people smile when they see one at a vintage bus show, polished to a shine, its giant windshield reflecting the world around it. Because sometimes, the vehicles that give us the biggest headaches are the ones we miss the most when they're gone. Did you ever ride a fishbowl? Do you remember the city, the route, or what it felt like to look out that giant windshield? Share your memories in the comments. I'd love to hear your stories. And if you enjoyed this trip back in time, hit that like button, share this video with a friend, and subscribe so you don't miss more tales from the golden age of transportation.